You're listening to Let Me Speak to a Manager with Frank Cava and Ian Matthews.
What a crock of shit.
Yeah, that was hot mic, Sam.
It's 30 minutes away. I'll be there in 10.
Do it live! I'll write it and we'll do it live!
The Republican-controlled House of Representatives, in an effort to alleviate the effects of the the Great Depression, passed the the tariff bill, the Hawley-Smoot Tariff Act, which raised or raised tariffs in an effort to collect more revenue for the federal government. Did it work? Anyone know the effects? It did not work, and the United States sank deeper into the Great Depression. Today, we have a similar debate over this. Anyone know what this is, class? Anyone?
Laffer curve.
Anyone seen this before? The Laffer curve. Anyone know what this says? It says that at this point on the revenue curve, you will get exactly the same amount of revenue as at this point. This is very controversial. Does anyone know what Vice President Bush called this in 1980? Anyone? Something DOO economics. Voodoo economics.
A beaut. Frankie!
Ian, you front ran me, you son of a bitch. We had Ben Stein.
A little bit of a cold open there. A little bit of a cold open. Frankie, you said you had an incredible story on how Ben Stein got the Ferris Bueller job. So this better be a banger because you wouldn't even tell me before we started recording.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, right? So Ben Stein got introduced to several people in Hollywood who eventually introduced him to John Hughes. And John Hughes is who wrote 16 Candles, all the movies from Chicago, like the one in the high school, Breakfast Club, and Ferris Bueller's Day Off, right?
Oh, sad.
So one of the things that was really interesting with this is they found Ben Stein. John Hughes just thought he had a really interesting voice. So they brought him in to be the teacher. But they started talking at one of the breaks, and they asked Ben Stein, like, what do you do? He goes, I'm an economist. And he goes, oh, I just thought you were like an actor. He goes, no, I'm really an economist. He goes, is there something you could do? Could you give a lecture cold? He goes, 100%. So that was not in the script at all. And he sits up in front of the board and he explains the entire economic cycle. And it was like a 45-minute lecture. They took a couple of things out of voodoo economics, President Bush, President Reagan, all the stuff that we talked about that was really topical from Ferris Bueller's Day Off that came out in 1986. And what's critical for this is people sleeping on their table and drooling, which Ian thinks is a more interesting topic than what I like, which is Frost, Nixon, that type of stuff. But no, what we're going to talk about is tariffs, Smoot, Hawley tariffs, and how the juxtaposition for the ones that worked in the 1800s.
Tariffs, is this a more or less interesting topic than when Frank made me do a 90-minute episode on Nixon and Watergate? Which I'm not
Watergate's more interesting. But I
still,
realized
Frank has been working me on what are we doing part 2 of Watergate? What are we really diving into? Who was Deep Throat? When are we doing this? Like Frank could do that all day. We could do that every Wednesday. Just talk about Watergate and Nixon.
Terrific.
Frank would be happy.
And all the ladies that like to listen to us would love to see Robert Redford from the late 70s when he portrayed one of the reporters. But that was the story, which I thought was really cool. He got this job to talk because he had a great voice. And then all that other stuff was ad-libbed. And he literally talked about the difference between the 80s and the economics of the first Reagan term and the economics of Smoot-Hawley, the tariffs from the Great Depression. And what we're going to talk about today is how do you use tariffs? How does it work? How does it not work? Like when are they? We'll get into it.
It's funny because that actor, the economist,
Ben Stein,
talking about how things last. Some of the kids on my baseball team every once in a while, when no one's talking, will say Bueller. And I asked them one time, like, have you guys seen Ferris Bueller's Day Off? And
no chance.
No. they just say Bueller because their parents say Bueller whenever it's quiet. So they just say Bueller. They don't even know why they're saying Bueller, which is cute in itself. But Frank and I recorded last week, and we recorded an episode where we opined about where we thought asset values were going, and in particular real estate asset values. And it's pretty funny because on that day we said,
let's
there's big news coming. There's some, Trump might be talking about
tariffs.
I think today at 4:00, he's going to be talking about tariffs, so that could have an impact on some of this. But let's go ahead and talk about real estate anyway.
We talked at literally between 11 and 1 Eastern time. 3 hours later, he drops a bomb. And then if you've been on this planet for the last couple of weeks or a couple of days, you know what's going on. He brings up the poster board with like these countries and not very specific orders with different tariffs. And there's a tariff on an island called McDonald Island that literally has nothing but penguins, but they have tariffs. So it's been a crazy week.
One of my favorite memes on the internet over the last week is a picture. It's like a picture of an island with penguins, and then there's a picture of Trump next to it, and it just says "fuck them penguins." It's gorgeous. So
the only thing that make that better if the penguin had a sign up that said "woke is dead."
So to start, this has been the most telegraphed move in presidential history. Trump has literally been talking about tariffs and protecting American jobs and how bad we are at negotiating deals since the 90s. He's been talking about Asians stealing the auto industry from us and steel. And he's been talking about all these things. And in his first term, he started with some tariffs, with 10% on China, and didn't really get into this level of detail. But I think what has shocked the market, and in a 3-day period, the stock market dropped on a percentage basis. It was the largest 3-day drop since 1987, which that's long-term capital management, which it was like a 30% drop in one day where the market just had a kind of a panic sesh. But I found it crazy that it was a bigger drop, Frankie, than any time in the Great Recession, which I felt like during that time there was just a lot scarier period than this. But obviously the market has reacted poorly to the administration rolling out new tariffs and rather large ones on 60 nations all at once. So little bit unprecedented in modern times. There are some precedents that we can talk about, but the initial reaction is we sit here less than 1 week really, which is crazy. It feels like this happened weeks ago because that's all you've seen on the news and I've been reading a lot about it. But as we sit here, the market has really taken this poorly. And a lot of people are trying to figure out what exactly is the end game. And that is why you tune in to Let Me Speak to a Manager, because no one knows the topic of modern macroeconomics like Frank Cava and Ian Matthews. And we are here to help explain to you and give you some comfort in these trying times.
We really wanted to talk to you about the torpedo bat, but we thought that this was a little bit more relevant.
This is 3 weeks in a row that my torpedo bat episode has been pushed aside, and I'm incredibly frustrated by that, but we do have to stay relevant with the times.
It has been torpedoed. So I don't know the markets as well as Ian. I know Richmond real estate very well. And what I spend my days focusing on is buying and selling houses. So what I know to be a fact is there's a bunch of things happening in the broader economy that I have absolutely no control over. So yesterday I spent about an hour and a half in front of a camera filming new commercials that we're going to run on TV. And we talked about a couple of different things. We usually talk about ease and those types of things, how you can sell, get cash. I kind of did a parody where we'll use it on the internet. We talked about we'll never charge Kava Capital, never charges a tariff. Well, we're US based, so of course not. We don't ship anything. But I thought it'd be fun to kind of do. But I interviewed basically everybody who works for us in the sales department. And these were the things that came up. Uncertainty, changing times, prices are going up. there's a lot of uncertainty with that. There's fear, there's anger. There's just a lot of like lack of faith in the organisms running things because it's just more expensive. I don't cook. I have someone who does it for me. Literally, this is the third week in a row she can't find eggs at Whole Foods. They don't have like egg white substitutes. Like, how do you not have that? So like everybody is feeling something, and you feel it at a different level. Ian and I were talking about this before we hit the record button, and what we had come up with is this one's a little bit less stressful than the others. We're older, we're more established, we're a little bit further away from kind of paycheck to paycheck, where there was a period in my life where that was part of my life. So I think you have to look at it from where you are, what you're kind of going through, and your station in life. But then if you're looking at this, like, how do I apply this to work? I think the thing is nobody knows. So we buy houses. We like to get the need behind the need and understand it. And if there's a way to satisfy that need, we buy more. What I can tell you is we bought 9 houses, which is a lot, since last Wednesday. That's a ton in a 5-day period. So like usually we'll buy somewhere between 25 and 30 in a month. Like 9 in a 4 work days is a lot because people are feeling things. We've had renegotiations open up where we didn't have the right price and people didn't know what the number was. And they came back to us and said, I'll give you less. I just want to sell it. So I think there's uncertainty everywhere. I think the only people who think they know don't. And that's kind of where my head is, kind of as a quick check-in.
So there are multiple ways that you can tariff. Tariff is just a tax on goods. You can tariff across the board. You can tariff an entire country. So you could say any good coming out of that country, we are going to levy this kind of a tax on, which a lot of countries do that with us. Because we are such a net exporter, people around the world want our goods.
Yep.
Or you can tariff an industry. And that is probably a more common thing that you'll see. So you might say, hey, listen, in our interest as a country, we think it's important to have a healthy steel industry. There's a lot of reasons for that, right? Steel makes weapons, steel makes airplanes, and if you can't make any of it and the world decided to quit selling it to you,
you're in trouble.
You'd be in trouble, right? So you could tariff that to protect that industry, which that's protectionism. Europe is really big on this, right? They protect some of their most important industries. America's never really been big on it. We're capitalists, so we like to sell our goods to everyone as much as we can and try to keep trade barriers away. And there's really 2 big examples of this in American history, right? So one of them we just heard from Ferris Bueller's Day Off was the Smoot-Hawley Act, and that came right on the heels of the Great Depression. The other big president who was really into tariffs was McKinley, and McKinley was late 1800s, early 1900s. And interesting enough, he's sort of a hero of President Trump. Trump talks about McKinley all the time, not just from a tariff perspective, but a lot of things that McKinley did. McKinley largely ran over one of the biggest boom periods in American history.
McKinley also named the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America, but it was overturned after he died.
Yeah. Also oversaw the annexations of Hawaii, Philippines, Puerto Rico, American Samoa. So you're hearing Donald Trump talk a lot about sure would like Greenland. Hey, wouldn't mind snagging Canada as a state. That's very McKinley-esque. McKinley went out and negotiated a bunch of deals that snagged up extra dirt for America. It feels today, like back then was the Wild West, truly the Wild West, right? West expansion. It felt like everything was up for grabs then. I feel like when Donald Trump talks about it today, it feels very hostile when you start talking about annexations, right? It just feels like a little late in the game to be doing that, but that's neither here nor there. I only bring that up because Trump has studied McKinley's presidency more than just about any's. Also important to note, McKinley was assassinated. So a lot of the things he did were every bit as unpopular back then as some of them are today around Donald Trump. But McKinley put a lot of his tariffs were put in place at a time where the United States had rapid industrialization, so expanding westward, and a lot of our industries were babies, right? Steel, aluminum, and had he not put those tariffs in place, the British would have continued to dominate because we were growing, we were building skyscrapers, we were building buildings everywhere. We just had this insatiable hunger for goods of all kinds, as happens in any expansion. And the British could do it a lot cheaper than America could. Our steel mills didn't have the technology, they didn't have the workers, we didn't have the skilled labor to produce steel, to produce concrete, to produce paper, to produce all the lumber, all the things that a growing nation needs. And more mature countries could flood our market with cheaper things because they were just better at making it. And so those tariffs served in growing industries where there was nothing. It served as making it more expensive for people to dump on us and making those industries more profitable in the short term, which I believe that's a great use of a tariff. And I also believe it's a great use of a tariff if you deem that that material, that resource, that product as important for national interest, right? So I take World War II, Frankie. How were we getting ahead in that war? We took all of those big manufacturing facilities in Detroit and we turned them into bomber factories. We churned out tanks, we turned out Jeeps. We were able to just put together an arsenal that was unmatched, right? Because Detroit wasn't getting bombed every day like Germany. Our factories weren't getting bombed. So we were just sending over all the products you want. So that was helpful to have a heavy industry of that kind. Is it helpful to be able to make iPhones? I don't know. I don't know that that's in the national interest, right? There's certain products that you look at and you say, let someone else make that. I don't think that that's in our national interest to have to tariff. But regardless, the tariffs under McKinley absolutely worked. In the time that he put them in, if you were to measure that time over a 40-year period, massive growth. The country got exceptionally rich over that time. It was an incredible boom era, and the tariffs filled our coffers with money, but also protected industries that grew and started selling to the rest of the world. Whereas in Smoot-Hawley, these were tariffs that were put in place after the stock market crash when the economy was in a terrible position. So this was 1929, 40 years later. And these were less targeted tariffs, a little bit more the way Trump has led. They were kind of across the board on everything, everywhere. And what ended up happening is people found other sellers. And so a weak economy was weakened by putting those tariffs. And it was largely thought to have failed in a bad way, which led to the Great Depression, which was about the most depressing 15-year period in this country's history.
I'm not sure if that's much of a handoff. So I don't know what to do with that. I know the way podcasting works for our loyal listeners. This is where Ian usually says, Frank, it's your turn to talk. A few things. So with the first tariffs Ian mentioned in the 1890s with McKinley's tariffs, we were on the back end of recovering from the Civil War, and we were actually pretty strong, and we were also not a country that was in incredible debt, and it made sense to do some of the things that we're doing because our infrastructure was different, and it made sense. We had some of the burgeoning technologies that would allow us to kind of capitalize on this, and it fueled and gave us a really nice runway. What the 1930s did is that we were already kind of over a cliff, and we tried to do everything desperately that we could, but the rest of the world was also in a depression, and these things didn't work because we were kind of haphazardly putting it in place. What I think is actually more interesting about these tariffs is how they're being used this time. I don't know if it's a playbook from 1890 or 1930. My guess it is not. I think Donald Trump is not someone who's incredibly well read or spends a lot of time on history. I think he gets highlights and he gets kind of snapshots and he gets it in his head and he kind of sticks with it. There's an interview from 1990 with Trump on Larry King Live, and he was a Democrat back then, and that was a pretty left-leaning show. But the reason I say those things is for this very reason. He talks about what a great idea tariffs were 45 years ago, or 35 years ago, excuse me. So he's been on this for 35 to 40 years of something he wanted to do. This is what I actually think is more interesting. Donald Trump wrote a book in the 1980s called The Art of the Deal. And The Art of the Deal talks about 5 things: thinking big, leverage, publicity, fighting back, and then different principles that you can utilize, like leverage, thinking big, promotion, and knowing your market. If you know that stuff, what it gives you the opportunity to do is to trade or to negotiate or to win. So what I think is it's a combination of all these other things broadly kind of planting into his head. And how do you use those to negotiate? We're going to put tariffs on you if fentanyl continues. We're going to put tariffs on you if the border doesn't close up. So what I think it's really unique this time is our position as a country and then how they're being utilized. Is it really a dollar generator? I don't know. Is it a negotiating tactic? That I think is what I think is more valuable right now, but it's yet to be fully played out to understand where it's going.
I definitely think that there's two reasons that Trump could be doing it this way. And I think one area that he has read on is McKinley. I don't think he's read on a lot of American history. I think he has studied McKinley a lot because he can talk about McKinley a lot. The one reason they could be doing it is truly to boost the hell out of our revenue. Like, tariff everyone and we'll bring in more money than we'll lose if they tariff us back, because we're a net exporter, right? So we don't run a surplus the way we run a deficit. So
Can we double click on that for a second? I think this makes sense, right? So the biggest imbalance that we have is China. And Ian actually is more in tune with this than I am, and pays attention to it in great detail. If you look around now or listen or read the right stuff, China is actually in their own depression. So what I think is happening is, if you look at this, they're the biggest net exporter to us. So they have retaliated with tariffs in a way that is pretty meaningful. But what it could be is that the bully is taking one really big, powerful shot at someone who's very weak. And that to me is something that I think is real. We have an imbalance on imports. They have an imbalance in exports. So this is something that's a power struggle that could really change the world order going forward. We got 75 years left in this century. There's still a good chance that we could win the century. This could be one of the moves that helps set that up.
Yeah, so you're kind of leading into the second reason that Trump might be doing this, which is to block out China and reset the balance of power with these other 50-some countries that want to play ball.
Yep.
He has been talking forever that we are suckers. And people say, oh, yeah, he's playing chess. Trump doesn't strike me as a chess player. Chess players think like 10 moves ahead. I don't think that's his style. He's more of a brawler. Take a swing and see what happens, then adjust like a boxer would.
Right.
I almost see him more playing a game of Texas Hold'em. So in poker, if you have a big pile of chips, the dumbest thing you can do is just sit around for 6 hours letting people nibble away at your chips and not playing hands. If you've got a big pile, your goal should be to make the small guys go all in and risk everything frequently. So you use your chips, you press, and you try to put people in a position where they have to take unnecessary risks. And in doing so, if I'm playing Frank and I've got $10,000 on the table and Frank's down to his last 400, I'm making sure this pot's $400, and we may have a 50-50 chance of winning against each other here, but I can handle a $400 loss. Frank takes that 50-50, best he can do is double it and he's 800. I'm still in good shape. My goal is to make Frank play with too much that he's uncomfortable with so that he goes all in and he's out of the game. And I think that's the way Trump is looking at this is we have the biggest pile at the table of money, and that's undeniable, right? We've got a bigger GDP, we've got less debt than most countries. We are the we are the dominant the dollar is the dominant currency in the world. A lot of reasons for it. And I think he is trying to make everyone go in. The other thing that I think this is all about is one, I do believe he wants that. You've been hearing him say we're suckers forever. We do bad deals. Why don't we play our hand more? Why are we protecting everyone and paying them money? Why aren't people paying for that? He really does want to reset America's dominance. He's big on that. But I also think he sees China as a very big risk. I think there's 60 countries involved. I think the one he really cares the most about, that he worries about, is China. It's kind of like, in the 80s, Magic Johnson might be playing a game, against the Supersonics, but he's really reading the paper that night to see how Larry Bird did. All he really cares about is the Celtics. All the Celtics really cared about was Magic and the Lakers. I think that China is the one country that could overtake America as the dominant superpower in the world. And I think that is on Trump's mind. And they are weak. They overbuilt. Their GDP is less than it was before COVID happened. And they've got ghost buildings that have been built, like billions and billions of dollars of real estate with no one living in it right now. Their debt levels are higher. Their population is shrinking. Their unemployment is high. They're going through a depression. And Trump is looking at it and saying, I'm going to strike. You've been getting more and more powerful. And China's no longer this sweet little nation that builds things cheap for everyone. They've become very antagonistic. Right? They're running military exercises around Taiwan, which is an ally of ours, and we've told them not to do that. They've got docks all over the Panama Canal. They've got boats that are circling around it. So they are very much trying to display their strength from a defensive standpoint. And I think that a lot of this has to do with Trump weakening a nation who is threatening the dominance of America. I'm not sure if you agree with any of that, but I think that those two things are at the heart of what he's trying to do, wrong, right, or indifferent. And whether it's going to work or not, I'm not sure. I think those are the two driving motivators.
What I think is a little bit, I don't know about China. I don't know about the other countries. Literally, as you were talking, the Wall Street Journal sent something I saw on my watch that said, Trump's reckless world order. So the New York Times is pretty far left. The Wall Street Journal is pretty far right. Both of them are using the word reckless a lot. So I don't know. This is what I'm very encouraged by. I'm encouraged by the people who are around. There are a bunch of former Democrats, and that doesn't make them good or bad. There's just a bunch of people that were on the other side of the aisle that have moved over to the right because they think where we were was bad. Our debt is really, really high. Our expense is really, really high. Like the sweet spot is you want to spend about 18%. Your government needs to be about 18% of your GDP. Usually we run something between 18 and 21%. During the Biden era, we got as high as 25%. These small percentages matter a lot. So what we're trying to think about is we're 40 trillion in debt. We have all of these other things going on. Our expenditures are way too high. And what I think is we're trying to do a lot of things at the same time. So there's Doge, which is on the cutting side. But in order to get out of a $40 trillion hole, you also need to earn. So I think what they're doing with tariffs is they're trying to figure out, is it used as a negotiating chip? Is it an earnings tool? And honestly, I don't think they know. The one thing I am encouraged by is this. Trump he pivots. If something doesn't work and he can't get in front of a TV and he cannot just at the top of his lungs talk about how something is won or is victory, he changes course. So I think what will happen in this is we have to see it through. This is the best analogy I can give you. I work out with a trainer. My personal trainer and I are having a conversation. He gets phone calls all the time, and someone's 100 pounds plus overweight. And they're like, my son is getting married in 2 months. I'd like to lose 100 pounds. And he goes, you should have called me 2 years ago. We, as a country, need to lose 100 pounds. It cannot be done in a day. So this is part of the crash diet that we're starting with some fundamentals around it. And we're going to see what works and what doesn't take. And then we're going to pivot off of it. I get nervous about the socioeconomics of this. We have been very tethered and close with Europe for 80 plus years. We're starting to sever some of those ties. I get nervous about those types of things, like what are the downline effects? But I think where we're coming from is a negotiating tool, a driver, and in the end, can we strengthen ourselves and make ourselves a place and a destination? So there's two people in the administration that I think are interesting. Howard Lutnick is one, and Scott Besson is the other. Scott Besson, I heard an interview with him a few days ago, and this is literally what he said. He said, the fall of the stock market is a Magnificent Seven problem. It's not a MAGA problem. He also said his number one job is this. He's the number one U.S. bond salesman. All of these things work together in concert. And if we can then drive foreign dollars into our bonds, it strengthens us. The tariffs could help with that. And it becomes part of a bigger program, which continues to help us on a dominant path.
At some point, the debt needs to be paid.
100%.
Right. And so if you go out and
it's got to be defaulted, and that's going to be real messy. So, and most of it's with a big share of it's with China. So one way or the other, it's got to be paid, or there's going to be a reorder.
Good friend of mine, right out of college,
I know,
loved to have good times, loved to celebrate, loved to party, was known for picking up a whole bar tab, buying everyone a round of shots, just good time guy. Racked up like $50,000 in credit cards at a time where he was making 50, maybe 40, right? And that only ends one way. Like at some point, one credit card company will say you've hit your limit and the other one doesn't give you any more credit. Like, and we've been doing some of that. So as a president, you can run on, hey, I'm going to run more stimulus. Hey, we're going to jack up revenues on the rich and we're going to drop your taxes. And, you know, that like when you say voodoo math, right? Voodoo economics, at some point, the debt has to be paid. The balance has to be. And my friend ultimately ended up moving out of the city, had to get rid of his expensive apartment, moved out of the city, moved back in with mom and dad, and took a job, you know, and saved money for 3 years. The pain it was like losing 100 pounds, right? There is pain to do this. So you can choose your pain. You can jack up everyone's taxes. You can tax other nations. You can cut the crap out of services and expenses, which they're trying to do with Doge, but good luck doing that if you don't go after Social Security and Medicare. Like those are the two main entitlements through there. But there is some pain. There is some pain. If you are going to tighten your belt, it's going to drive out a recession. If you are going to jack taxes up, either through tariffs or on people, that's going to drive a recession. So choose your pain and choose how quickly you want to go through that pain. And now with tariffs, the pain comes with higher prices, right? So if I tariff another country, let's just take home building. Frank's in the home building business, sort of. We don't make enough lumber to build as much as we do. We get most of our lumber from outside the country, actually a lot of it from Canada. We don't make gypsum. We buy our gypsum from other places. What's gypsum in? It's in drywall. There's drywall in every project that Frank does. All that stuff is about to get more expensive, right? Because people know if you're going to tariff us, we are going to hit you where it hurts. We are going to tariff things that we know you rely on us for. Aluminum is about to get more expensive. Steel is about to get more expensive. Plastics are about to get more expensive. Appliances are going to be crazy more expensive, right? So all of this is going to lead to inflation, unless he is successful in negotiating with all these countries and bringing it down on both sides, which if he is, he's pulled off a minor miracle, which would be incredible. But if the tariffs stay, people will tariff us, right? We threw the tariff on China. What did they do? They upped the game, right? Now like both countries are tariffs of 100%. And for any product that we need things, we're just not a self-sufficient nation. We don't make enough of this stuff anymore to say like we'll be fine on our own. You can't just go make those factories will take 3 to 4 years to build, and there's no way around. Everything will be more expensive. People won't be able to afford it, and then they'll have something else they're pissed about. But is that better, or do we just default? You don't want to default. You default, then think about that. No one will ever want to buy our treasuries again, right? So do we go fix our stuff internally, in-house, and take the pain now? Or do you keep promising the American people everything's going to be all right, lying to them, and take it from 40 trillion to 100 trillion? I don't know if that's healthy, because that ends in default. That ends in a depression. So do we want a recession today or a depression in 5 to 7 years where everything completely falls apart? And then you truly have a changing of the world order.
So there was an article that came out last night. I literally thought it was in the journal, but it actually was from the Times. And it said there's a bunch of just different things happening in the world. And one of them was this: U.S. tariffs. Trump said his tariffs have been somewhat explosive, but defended his far-reaching trade war, saying more than 70 countries have contacted the White House to make deals. He plans to impose additional tariffs on Wednesday, including raising the tax on goods from China to at least 104%. So when I went on a pretty specific diet last year, it was very successful. But I've always been a workout guy. But what I learned in my diet and like fitness to get to a point of like where I needed to lose weight is I actually needed to do less explosive and hard working out. And the reason for that was I needed a sustained program, because it's hard to work out at the peak of your workout powers and eat less. But the only way that you can lose weight is you have to eat less. What we're trying to do is simultaneously as a country to accumulate money, we're trying to make more and spend less. Those things work. They don't always go together. It's usually one or the other. Now, the thing I get encouraged about is there's enough smart people around who are looking at these different things and looking at it from the standpoint of which one and how do we balance it. I do believe it is going to be very messy, but we have been accumulating debt for about 85 years. We've been a debtor nation since Reagan's first term, which is over 40 at this point. So it's going to be a messy thing. So I don't understand it. The thing I look at is this: time frames in politics are very small. The midterm elections are literally 19 months away, just under 18 and a half. People are going to start running for those in about a year. So that being the case, there's a very, very, very small amount of time where everything is properly aligned for there to be real movement. So I think the swiftness with which this is happening is because of those motivations and understanding this.
Yeah.
Trump had 4 years in office before and got nearly none of this done. He tried. He had the wrong people around him.
Never had a majority. Never had all three.
And he also, the people who were around him were weaker. This time, the people are way stronger. There has been a lot of swiftness. George Washington said the only...
Except for that Peter Navarro guy that Elon Musk calls Peter Retardo.
But going back to an era that Ian loves with McKinley, even further back, what Washington said, the only bad decisions is no decision. This group of people in the White House, we're looking at literally like not even 90 days yet. What they have done is they've moved swiftly and they have a lot of data points and they're continuing to tweak it. And I think it has a chance to, it's going to be unlike anything we've ever dealt with, but we're in a position where we're really strong, we're really powerful, but we're not going to be much longer if we don't address some of these things. And these are real adults, I think, addressing it.
Yeah. I like most of the people that Trump is surrounded by. I do think there's some people with agendas that I don't like.
100%.
That are kind of around, but I think that's with all things. It's.
Let's go back to the last election. There was 4 people on the top of the ticket, 1 and 2. Like, do you like any of them on balance? Like JD Vance to me was the most sane of the group and the most accomplished and the most tethered. And like, so yes, I agree that it's not a perfect mix, but at the same time, I have seen a flight to people who have executive level of experience, and those people know how to make decisions in large organizations. And people are like, well, this isn't a company. Yeah, I get that, but we need some shrewd. We're a business podcast. I see business parallels, and I can relate to that. I can be more patient because as a business mind, that makes sense to me.
Ultimately, Frank and I were texting back and forth over the weekend, and I find times like this fascinating. Maybe I'm sick, but I actually enjoy when there's major disruptions, or I like to study it, look at the history, everything else. And Frankie and I are old now, and we've been through some big ones. And my take on this is there have really been 5 big ones in my life where the market was completely disrupted. The first one was the dot-com bubble, and the beauty of the dot-com bubble, that was like 2000. I was broke. I owned no stocks. I didn't really give a shit. All I knew was this is a pretty crappy time to be starting in sales and graduating college. I wish I would have started 5 years ago when everyone was getting rich. I started during a recession that was bordering on a depression in some of the industries I was in.
Yep.
So that was a scary time. 9/11 was a very scary time. And again, markets hate uncertainty. During 9/11, it was like, when's the next bomb going to happen? When's the next terrorist attack? I feel like that was like 6-9 months where I was nervous every time I got on a plane or went anywhere because we just didn't know. We didn't have enough info. And so the market was a mess. Then you had the Great Recession, which Frank and I were knee deep in the middle of the most gritty, granular details. We met the people that took the loans who defaulted on the houses that collapsed the market. We knew the actual people losing the money on the front end. And I knew the banks, and I knew the bankers that were putting that money out, that were trying to save their companies. So we were in the middle of that one. COVID was very scary. And COVID was scary because if we didn't find a cure for it and it was as bad as people were saying, the market just couldn't open. Like that wasn't, there wasn't something. And then this one, which I have trouble putting this in the same, like, I know the stock market has dropped, but the reason why I don't give it the same weight. In the Great Recession, when the housing market collapsed and that was a major debt unraveling, we sort of knew this thing's going to just take years to unravel. Like all of these houses, these people need to get foreclosed on. The banks need to sell them. Prices are going to drop. You just knew in the middle of that, there's no quick fix. There's no bill the government can put in place. There's no savior. This is going to be ugly for a while. With COVID, to me, it was scarier because the president couldn't just say, hey, let's drop this. Let's drop this. With this one, Frankie, with tariffs, I feel like Trump could come out tomorrow and be like, that didn't work. Let's go work on that tax cutting thing. And the market would be off to the races. And so for me, I'm looking at this as an incredible opportunity that the market is disrupted. There is no way that Amazon is 35% less valuable today than it was 4 months ago. There is no way great home builders like NVR are 40% less valuable than they were in the fourth quarter of last year. So for me, on Thursday and Friday of last week and on Monday of this week, on those 3 really bad down days in the stock market, I was buying as much stock as I've bought any time in the last 5 years. I was a big buyer, and some of that is driven by just all the lessons I've taken from Buffett over the years of when people are freaking out, when fear is at its greatest, plug your nose and buy. And in 5-10 years, you're going to be happy you did. When I've done that, I did it in COVID a little bit. I didn't do it enough in the Great Recession. I was in a position where I was scared and I was selling a little bit, and that was a mistake. So I kind of look at periods of my life when there's been a lot of uncertainty and fear. I've always looked back and not thought of it as a big deal, but always said, man, what an opportunity that was to buy.
So last week we talked about the VIX. The VIX is the psychological index of the market, and it shows fear or where people's heads usually are at. And Ian talked about this last week. Usually the market is somewhere between 18 and 22%. And if you go back, the VIX goes back to about 2005. If you look at it over the last 30 years, 20 to 30 years, what you can see is that it usually is somewhere between 18 and 22. There have been a few periods, 2010, 2012. That's about it, that it ran up to about 40. And there's been 3 times where it's gotten over 50. It's right in the heart of like Lehman Brothers collapsing in 2008, COVID, and now. So there is enormous amounts of fear. So the way that I summarize and kind of close is this. We don't know where this is going. The best time to plant a tree was yesterday or 20 years ago. The second best time to do it is today. So if you haven't already planted that tree and you haven't started to bear the fruit of it, the time to start to prepare is now. And we've been talking about like we're in the back end of a cycle. We're in the back end of like 85 years since the last war. We've got 15 years in the rearview mirror since the last part of the Great Recession. So I don't know where this thing is going to go, and I don't know where it's going to land. But I do know this. There's a movie that I love called Charlie Wilson's War, and what it is it's how a congressman from Texas basically beat communism. And if you want to watch the movie, it's incredible, but he has a counterbalance. And his counterbalance is this guy from the Secret Service named Gus Avocados. And he tells a story about a boy on his 14th birthday and how the boy gets a horse. And everybody in the village says, how wonderful. And then there's a Zen master. And the Zen master says, we'll see. 2 years later, the boy falls off the horse, breaks his leg, and everyone says, how terrible. And the Zen master says, we'll see. Then the war breaks out and all the young men have to go off to war, but the boy can't go because he fell off his horse and he broke his leg. And all the people in town say, how wonderful. And the Zen master says, we'll see. The point of the story, as it's portrayed in the movie, is that the actions have unforeseen consequences. And it's really important to consider the long-term implications of something before you come to a conclusion. That's where I'm at. We'll see. The thing that I'm encouraged about is I think there's enough smart people around this time where they're going to pivot if it doesn't work. So that's where my head's at.
I think that's right. I think one way or another, there are going to be disruptions. There's going to be pain. There are going to be areas of the economy that there are supply chain issues. There are going to be issues with pricing. There are going to be some things you pay for that are very expensive. But ultimately, I just look at this as, we're having to eat our vegetables a little bit. The approach, I don't know if we agree or disagree with the approach, but it happened. I just kind of always look at it and say, how about that? What do you think about that? Right? What a time to be alive. What an interesting period of time to watch, to see. But I love that. We'll see. And we'll see if anyone actually listens to this podcast. But I think it's going to absolutely blow up and be a viral sensation.
What I think we'll talk about more and more as time goes on is just the importance of getting to understand who your client is, who your customer is, and then how do you recession-proof yourself? How do you do it personally? How do you do it at work? And there's a lot of things that you can do, but the really important thing is prioritize what's the most important thing and be great at what you do. If you do those things, it's all going to work out, especially if you had a good foundation under you.
And one thing no one can question is Frank is very good at being a great co-host. I mean, just a dynamite job by you today, Frank. Really proud of you.
You could have done better, but I feel like I did a good job.
Fuck you, asshole. You're Frankie.
See ya.
If you like what you just heard, and judging by the viewership numbers, you did, hit that follow button and leave us a 5-star review. It helps other people find the show. And it lets Frankie and I know that, a few people are listening to this.